When Lucasfilm released Star Wars in theaters, it was a revelation. It was such a success that it led to a boom in the popularity of the science fiction genre. Lucasfilm was able to satisfy the demands of Star Wars fans by providing a lucrative opportunity, licensing and merchandising. Outside the movie industry, Star Wars looked well reserved on everything such as action figures, comic books, toys, accessory, and so on. However, a question still remains with the fans. The question was whether or not Darth Vader is an actual human or an alien. There was no question that Star Wars needed a sequel. Ironically, Lucas' next idea was not to make the Empire assault the rebels in vengeance, but an actual invasion on the video game industry. After Star Wars was a hit in theaters, Lucas didn't waste any time beginning work on his next sequel. His next film was Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. It was released on May 21st, 1980, and it became another runaway hit. Many fans thought that the film had surpassed the original. Although the film garnered over $209 million, it didn't break any record from its predecessor. Lucas also began work on another film, but this time it would be an actual collaboration with Steven Spielberg. The film was Raiders of the Lost Ark. Originally, the concept was a sequel to Star Wars, featuring Luke Skywalker. However, things changed quite a bit during its development. Instead of having a science fiction universe, the Empire was collapsed and was replaced by the Nazi regime, while the Jedi Warrior was supplanted by none other than the archaeologist Indiana Jones, who was performed by Harrison Ford. Raiders of the Lost Ark was released and published by Paramount Pictures on June 12, 1981. The film became one of the greatest films of all time, featuring an intense action adventure where Indy would have to recover important treasure artifacts and fend off bad guys as he travels around the world. Like Star Wars, it also had its own predecessor, in this case, James Bond. Critics agree that the film was the best entry in the genre and praised the orchestral score from none other than John Williams. Later on, Indy would turn into a franchise, including Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. In November 1982, a year after the Lost Ark debut, a video game adaptation based on the same name was published and released by Atari for the Atari 2600. The game took its cues from the film. Players are tasked to navigate through the Temple of the Ancients and search for an important artifact called the Ark. Like the film, Jones will have to avoid traps and evade enemies as he navigates through the field. Despite the game having an adventure title, it didn't line up with gamers' expectation, and it was quickly overshadowed when Pitfall stole the scene. In April of 1982, Lucas decided he would form another company named Lucasfilm Games. Unlike both of the studios he founded, Lucasfilm Games would not focus on movie development. Instead, it would be focused on making games. Although Lucas did not have any experience in the video game industry, he founded Lucasfilm Games because he wanted to encourage his employees' creativity and he didn't want to release their games based on a deadline. So Lucas decided that he would hire a small team to work for his newly minted video game studio. 6 developers would be tasked to create tools for their game development. Game designer Noah Falstein, a former designer and programmers David Fox, Peter Laxton, Steve Arnold, Chip Morningstar, and Ron Gilbert were hired to work at Lucasfilm Games. On June 6, 1982, Lucasfilm Games received over $1 million so they could collaborate with Atari to develop 2 games for the Atari 8-bit home computers. These games would eventually be ported to other platforms. One was a sports game and the other would be an early space combat game, but those games would not appear until 2 years later. As licensed video games were starting to make their humbling appearance for all major motion picture, such as Superman for Atari 2600, video games' appearance for Star Wars started out as simple as it could get because of its 8-bit limitation. When talking about Star Wars or Indiana Jones video games, keep in mind that I only want to shine a light on the franchise itself, and won't include any electronic standalones such as the plug-and-play games, nor any other games such as Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3, Disney Infinity 3.0, and Soul Calibur 4 that features Star Wars characters in it. The first Star Wars licensed video game didn't come until 1982, when Parker Brothers acquired the rights to make Star Wars for consoles. Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back was released for Atari 2600 and Intellivision. A player is assigned the role of a snowspeeder pilot and are tasked to eliminate the Imperials to prevent them from destroying the rebel-powered generator. The game had plain alias graphics, and its audio and visuals sound whiny, but it exactly portrayed the scenes from the film. Then, in 1983, Parker Brothers released Return of the Jedi: Death Star Battle for the Atari 2600, but was later ported to other consoles, such as the Intellivision. Based on the scene from the film, the player would have to take control of the Millennium Falcon to shoot down TIE fighters. As he is fending off the enemy, he has to wait for the energy shield to go down in order to get to the Death Star. In the second stage, the player will have to shoot at the Death Star until he can make a clear shot at the reactor. Once destroyed, he will have to avoid the explosions in order to survive. Despite being another space shooter, it didn't do anything wildly different from its predecessors. In that same year, Parker Brothers released Star Wars: Jedi Arena, again for the Atari 2600. For the first time, the game allowed the players to wield an iconic blade by using their joystick. Players are tasked to defend themselves from the laser blaster from the Seeker. The aim of the game was to fire at the laser blaster from the Seeker at the opponent's shield and finally the opponent himself. Critics slammed the game for its confusing gameplay and for its lack of a dual scene. As the gaming industry began to heat up, many arcade hits such as Donkey Kong and Pac-Man started to fuel the market. Many big companies, regardless whether or not they have experience making games, began to jump on the bandwagon when they saw the hoard of US dollars. The market on the console was completely oversaturated. Little did they know that the well was about to go dry. The poor quality of the games and poor management decisions sparked incredible negativity towards the gaming industry. In 1983, the stock market for Atari and its owner, Warner, crashed. Interest in the video game medium began to decay. As the video game market became a passing fad, it left a bad taste in the minds of American gamers. Meanwhile, Lucas' life was collapsing around him. Lucas started to lose touch with his friends and family. The avalanche started when his wife, Mersha, wanted to start a family. Due to Lucas' medical issue, they both decided that they would adopt a baby girl, but his family would be short-lived. Mersha complained that her husband spent way more time working on his Star Wars film and never offered to care for their daughter. Sure, Mersha was impressed with Lucas' Star Wars that made millions of dollars for Lucasfilm. She wondered if Lucas would go out for dinner or a vacation in Europe with his family, but her husband would say no and he continued to prioritize his work on Star Wars. By the time his third film was complete, Lucas hoped that he would break away from making any more Star Wars films and try to take care of his family. Unfortunately, his family took a turn to the worse and the unthinkable happened. Mersha and George got a divorce. Mersha walked away from George and remarried Tom Rodriguez. Soon, she will have her own children with her new husband, and Lucas' third Star Wars film will be the last title she will work on as a film editor. Now titled Star Wars: Return of the Jedi, Lucas' third film was released on May 25, 1983. The film was Lucas' third home run in a row. The film was well received by critics for its fun storyline and its pure entertainment. Unfortunately, even with all that hype and praise for the third film, the film only earned $260 million at the box office. Therefore, it made a little more money than the last film. For the first time, one of Lucas' films was regarded as a major financial disappointment. This was the beginning of Lucas starting to feel the dismissive ease of slowly being downgraded in his own company. But the divorce wasn't his own problem. He and his friends were crumbling all around him. Coppola's own film company, American Zoetrope, was bankrupt, and Spielberg's marriage was such a disaster that it resulted in a $100 million divorce settlement. Because Lucas felt the heavy blow of the American New Wave collapse, he decided that he would stop making more Star Wars films and focus on taking care of his daughter. Star Wars quietly went dark within the film industry. But the nil medium struggled on. In 1983, Atari launched Star Wars Arcade for the arcade. Unlike most of the Parker Brothers games, the games used vector graphics that looked very similar to Atari's Battlezone. Instead of controlling a tank, the player flew an X-Wing while fending off enemy TIE fighters. Like the first film, players would have to fly in the trenches of the Death Star and deploy the proton torpedo on the exhaust. The game was praised for its smooth animation and its own digitized samples of voice from the film. As a result, the arcade hit is currently ranked number 4 as the most popular game of all time according to the readers of Killer List of Video Games. Another sequel for the arcade hit, Star Wars Return of the Jedi, was released in 1984. This game used raster graphics instead of vector graphics. It also removed the first-person perspective of the cockpit and opted to go for an asymmetrically projected perspective that was very similar to Sega's Zaxxon. Despite the change, the game allowed the player to control 3 different vehicles in stages based off the third film. In 1985, Atari released its last arcade game titled Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. This time, it was actually a proper sequel from the first arcade hit. Yes, the vector graphics returned, but this game was released as a conversion kit for the original game. Like the first game, Luke Skywalker will have to face the Battle of Hoth, and Han Solo will have to escape with his Millennium Falcon through the asteroid field. Although there wasn't anything completely different from the first game, one of the notable features was the Jedi bonus. If the player could shoot down a certain number of enemy fighters or avoid hitting the asteroids, they would be awarded with 1 letter at a time. Once all the letters were in place, all enemy shots would be instantly eliminated for a short time as a bonus. Meanwhile, at Lucasfilm Games, their first 2 games were officially complete and they were made available to retailers on March 1984. Ball Blazer is a one-on-one sports-style game. It served as a precursor to another popular sport game, Rocket League. The game takes place on a flat checkerboard playing field where the player controls a craft called a rotofoil. There was also 2-player split-screen support, meaning that other players could grab a second controller and duke each other out in a match. Their goal is to score points by carrying a floating ball and shooting it into the opponent's goal. The gameplay was simple, but the graphics were stunning at the time. Unsurprisingly, the main theme, called Song of the Grid, is what's best remembered about this game. Rescue on Fractalus was an early space combat shooter in first-person view where players are tasked to rescue down pilots from the ground and get them in the player's ship. As the player navigates through the treacherous mountain, which were generated by using fractal technology, the player will have to dispatch both anti-aircraft guns and flying saucers. They also had to be careful of the fake alien pilots who may try to smash their cockpit. The game was meant to be a Star Wars licensed game. However, the rights for Star Wars was given to other game developers, not Lucasfilm Games, so they were forced to create their own IP. Both games were visually stunning, and it was well received by critics. So far, it gave Lucasfilm Games a mighty good start. For now on, they would embrace their own creativity and continue to make more games by releasing them on the PC platform. At the same time, they will pull off the impossible by migrating from 2-player split screen to jumping into the massive multiplayer online. By 1985, they would actually make not 1, but 3 more games. The Eidolion was released for Apple II, MSX, Atari XL, XE, Commodore 64, Amstrad CPC, and the ZX Spectrum in December 1985. Armed with the fractal technology, the game was an early 3D shooter where the player would have to take control of a vehicle named the Eidolon in a mysterious cave. As the player navigates through the cave, the player will have to shoot the monsters and collect free diamonds to progress to the next level. Note that each enemy has a specific color and it can only be destroyed by firing orbs of that color. Some enemies can fire orbs at the Eidolon, but it can absorb them if set to the same color. In addition to dealing damage, each orb has their own effect. For example, the blue orbs can be used to freeze enemies temporarily. In addition to changing its color, the green orbs can transform to different kinds of enemies. Because of its outstanding graphics and impressive gameplay elements, the game was a hit. Coronis Rift was another early 3D vehicle shooter. Again, using the same fractal technology. Players navigate an alien planet and were tasked to retrieve modules with various functions from nearby hooks. These modules were used to offer different weapons, shields, and so on. They were only allowed to collect up to 6 different modules at a time. The player could trade or sell these modules as they progress throughout the game. As they search for more hooks, players are warned of incoming fire from Guardian saucers and they must fend off the saucers. Once again, the game was visually stunning and it was another major improvement from its predecessor. Habitat was a massively multiplayer online game that can only be played via the proprietary Quantum Link for the Commodore 64. Instead of using ASCII graphics or text-based gameplay like other online games such as Mud or Island of Kesmai, the game offered graphical feedback of a virtual environment. The characteristic of this game is that anyone can log on and create a digital version of themselves. Other times, players are free to reinvent themselves by giving them a whole new look. These digitized sprites were referred to by Lucasfilm games as Avatar. The name Avatar is equivalent to James Cameron's Avatar or Nickelodeon's Avatar: The Last Airbender. There is no relation. Once the avatar is made, they will enter a fully realized world where other avatars lived as well. Surprisingly, this world will be persistent. No matter who logged on or off, the world will always be there to return to. People are free to customize their own houses and pets, and they could also perform activities such as relaxing in a hot tub or playing chess. To test the system, Lucasfilm Games decided that they would run a 500-person beta. The developers figured that they have enough content to last players weeks. At some point, players started to ask for more content because they were eager to have something else to do. So, the developers figured that instead of adding more content, they will allow the player to make his own fun. How would they do this? They gave them swords so that they could kill each other. To everyone's horror, this idea worked so well that it destroyed its peaceful world. Instead of players playing chess, they grabbed their knives and started to murder each other. Unfortunately, this meant that anyone who wanted to walk around had no defense. Since everyone was in the same persistent universe, peaceful players got killed by everyone else. Even with all the griefing it generated, nobody stopped playing. Habitat beta testers were all sucked in, and they never let go. The 500 testers were soon using an incredible 1% of the entire Quantum Link network. Quantum Link figured that if Habitat ever came out of beta, and it garnered over 10,000 players, their networks would collapse. In May 1988, Habitat servers were shut down. However, the game for Habitat was later licensed to Fujitsu for release in Japan, and Quantum Link released a stripped-down version of the world as Club Carabine. It garnered over 15,000 players. It was a runaway success in the MMO genre. Later on, Quantum Link changed their names to America Online. June 27, 1986 saw a release of a musical fantasy film adventure called Labyrinth. It was directed by the Muppets creator Jim Henson and produced by George Lucas. The film followed a 15-year-old girl, Sarah Williams, who was rehearsing a play in the park. She realized that she is late to babysit her baby brother, so she rushed back home to take care of Toby. Toby has her teddy bear, so Sarah takes it from him, causing him to constantly cry. Sarah makes a wish that Toby be taken away by the Goblin King Jareth. Soon, she discovered that Toby had disappeared. The Goblin King confronts her and transports her into his kingdom. she will have 13 hours to find her baby brother or he would turn into a goblin. In that same year, a video game adaptation based on the same name called Labyrinth, the computer game, was released. Instead of having to type in a verb or a noun like Sierra games, the player will have all the available commands by scrolling the word wheel, one for verbs and one for noun. All they have to do is pick which word they want to use. However, the game was cursed with its movie tie-in. Neither the film nor the game performed well. However, it wasn't the last time Lucasfilm Games made an adventure game. In 1986, they released another game that was a ship simulation game called Pirchem Pegasus for Apple II, Amstrad CPC, Commodore 64, and MS-DOS. The game offered control of a Navy ship called Patrol Hydrofoil Missile Craft, which was tasked to eliminate all enemy craft that pose a threat. On top of that, the player could take control of other vehicles, such as choppers, so they can scout ahead for any potential threat. Along the way, players are tasked to complete specific objectives, such as escorting a friendly vessel to its destination or searching for a specific target to destroy. The game was a critical hit for its realism. The game ran smoothly and it was tight. Another solid hit from Lucasfilm Games. Through the 1980s, Lucasfilm Games avoided making the same glamorous poor decision that Atari had made. They put their efforts in developing games for the PC. Unlike most of the games that were made by Atari or Parker Brothers, Lucasfilm Games made the bold decision to make great games. Luckily, getting a solid deal and funding from big publishers such as Activision, Electronic Arts, and Atari paid off. And so, when the time came to make a new adventure game, they started work on a comedy B-horror game with a meteor crash. Little did anyone know that this game would become the adventure game that many other adventure games aspired to be. Tune in next time when Lucasfilm Games make one of the most classic games of all time. I'm Greg Heiduck. Thanks for tuning in.